Now welcome to another Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where once again this time we just have a question instead of the usual poll question, though I will still be reading and responding to some of the comments. And that question this time was, what, if anything, should Disney/Lucasfilm do with the character of Luke Skywalker going forward? How should he be used? How often should he be recast, done digitally, and so on? And before getting to those comments, let me just once again say thank you to everybody who votes or comments or watches these or any of my videos, again, across both the channels. And a huge thank you to those who support what I try to do here and on the other channel over on Patreon. Thank you so much for that. And now, getting right to it, we will, as always, begin with the top rated comment left on the poll, or the question in this case. And it came to us from WBFWBL, who said, "Nothing. Leave him alone. Enough damage has been done to him." And I kind of expected this, or something like this, to be the top comment, and this is not the only comment that says pretty much the exact same thing, that they should do nothing with him, that they need to leave him alone, they need to move on, they have done enough to Luke, please just stop. And so one of the reasons why I even bothered to ask this question, even though I knew, again, this was probably going to be the top comment and the overwhelming sentiment, which it was, is because if you go back in time roughly 4 years to Season 2 of The Mandalorian and Luke Skywalker magically suddenly appearing in the final episode, I think there was a moment there to not only save the character, but maybe even to save Star Wars, considering just how positive I think everybody was when he appeared there. I don't remember seeing too many people saying anything negative about it. Now, I'm sure there were. I'm sure not everybody loved his return there. But I feel like the vast majority of people and fans thought that was pretty dang cool to see him come back like that is how they wanted to see him in the sequel trilogy. And so I kind of wonder if we'd be in a different place right now if they had really embraced that return and maybe really tried to do something with Luke. Now, of course, we have the problem of all roads lead to the sequel trilogy, but it didn't seem to matter in that moment. Not everybody was saying, oh, this would be awesome if it wasn't for the sequel trilogy. Everybody was just kind of saying this is kind of awesome. And then, of course, he also came back in Book of Boba Fett. Now, there were a few more gripes about that one just because of the way he kind of looked there. Some people thought he looked a little lifeless and a little too digital, if you will. But overall, I think that was positively received. Now, there were some people who disagreed with his interaction with Grogu about giving him the choice and saying, this isn't how he should be. He should understand he's attached to Mando. I've made videos discussing that. Not going to get into it all here. But nevertheless, I do feel like had they embraced Luke at that point in time, maybe things would be different because, again, going to these comments, seeing what people are saying now, 4 years later, many of them have zero interest in the return of Luke Skywalker or doing virtually anything with him, though some people do have a few ideas, and we will get to one of those now. And it's this comment from Jared Locke, who said, "I'd like animated EU stories. They brand it as legends and just follow the stories that already exist. I'd eat that up." And I do think this is one of the best and smartest things they could do with Luke, because let's be honest, they are not just going to put him on the shelf, they're going to use him again some way, somehow, probably in the Heir to the Empire movie that is supposedly coming up from Dave Filoni. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But I think it makes sense to give people the version of Luke Skywalker that they're kind of missing, that they maybe initially fell in love with if you are a fan of the EU, or if you are going back now and reading them, which I hear people doing all the time, which is really cool to hear. I love hearing that people are going back and reading the old material and enjoying it the way many of us did originally. But anyway, I think this is a smart play for them. I don't think you would make it necessarily like Clone Wars animation. That does cost them a lot of money, not a ton of money in the grand scheme of things, but it is more expensive than a more simplistic style of animation. Maybe making it more of an anime instead of Clone Wars animation, if you will. I think a series that you labeled Legends or Revisiting Legends or something along those lines, where you are doing some of the more classic EU stories that feature Luke Skywalker and the other popular characters, of course, the other beloved OT characters, and some new ones. I think that is one of the smartest things they could do. It shows goodwill towards the fans. It kind of says, hey, we're sorry about canceling the EU. We're sorry about what we did with Luke in the new canon. Here is the version a lot of you are, again, missing. Alright, the next comment then comes to us from Plush Bro, who said, "I would love an animated series about his adventures post Return of the Jedi. The animated shows have been the most consistent in quality, and I think there's plenty of fun and interesting stories you could tell. I feel like the animated route is the best way to use the character in the future due to the fact that Mark Hamill is only getting older, and though I am not opposed to recasting, I feel like that's something Disney won't do. And unlike the previous comment that was suggesting maybe doing EU stories, I'm pretty sure they are suggesting doing stories about Luke in the new canon, which is another maybe good idea. And I say maybe because I don't know that a lot of people are going to warmly receive anything they do with Luke. Again, after reading all these comments, that is the conclusion you almost have to come to, that a lot of people just don't want Disney tampering with him at all, or that they have some stipulations like getting rid of Kennedy or wiping away the sequel trilogy so that we are now open-ended with the story of Luke Skywalker again, that we don't have to railroad him into the sequel trilogy and how he is there. But anyway, I don't think this is a terrible idea if you are indeed going to keep the sequels intact, which probably they are. I have discussed a lot before that it's all about money, right? If they truly believe that retconning the sequels will make them more money and win back the fandom and could truly repair things, if they knew for sure that was the case, I think they would be open to the idea. And by they, I mean everybody at Disney and at Lucasfilm. I think right now the big speed bump there is Kathleen Kennedy probably does not want her sequel trilogy retconned. But anyway, assuming the sequels are never retconned and that they do want to use Luke Skywalker again, which I think they do, probably your best bet if you want him in the new canon is to put him in an animated series. Now, you still have, again, the problem of all roads lead to the sequels, but if it's done right, if it's good, if it's enjoyable, if it is a Luke Skywalker as the fans want him to be, you may have people who can put the sequels out of their head and just enjoy it for what it is, especially if you kind of do leave it open-ended, where you don't try to make it seem like you are leading directly into the sequels and trying to explain grumpy Luke Skywalker, as I often call him. So yeah, I think either an EU animated series or trying to put him in the new canon and doing an animated series that way could both potentially be interesting and work. Alright, and moving on now, we have a comment here from Gelchert. I'm probably saying that wrong, my apologies. But they had to say the first thing they need to do is clean house. Then once they have some creatives who actually like and understand Luke, recast with a younger actor who can pass for a 30-something Mark Hamill. Then, and only then, start telling good Luke Skywalker stories again. If they have to ignore the sequel trilogy, that's a small price to pay for restoring one of the best parts of George Lucas's legacy. And what you said there at the end really kind of struck me, because I'd never really thought about the fact that Luke Skywalker is the legacy of George Lucas in many ways. I mean, of all the characters in Star Wars, he is sort of the one that, if you are going to do future Star Wars stories, you are going to carry on the legacy of George Lucas. He is that kind of central character. In the OT, of course, you could argue Anakin is the central character of the whole trilogy or saga. But he is the character that lives and goes on and is going to pass on not only in Story of the Jedi and his ways, as Yoda told him to, but he's kind of carrying on, again, the legacy of George Lucas. This is the character that embodies everything George Lucas was trying to say with Star Wars, I think. And so to use him the way they did in the sequels, again, I know some people out there enjoyed it, that's fine. But one of the main reasons a lot of people didn't enjoy it is they felt like it did tarnish the legacy of George Lucas. It tarnished everything he was trying to say with that character. And so even with the sequels looming in the background or down the road, I don't think it is a terrible idea to try and maybe recast Luke Skywalker and tell some good stories with him. And maybe those stories never exactly link up with the sequel trilogy, and we're always left to live in our own headcanon and just assume they are something different or they lead elsewhere and they are not a part of the Luke we see in the sequels. Alright, and now on to one final comment, and it comes to us from Hayer Law, who said, Sebastian Stan and do Heir to the Empire, Karen Gillan as Mara Jade. And honestly, I really do think there's a good chance they're going to do Heir to the Empire and maybe even recast Luke in it and potentially bring in Mara Jade, but probably not in the way you're suggesting or a lot of people are hoping or that we discussed before, where it is actually the original Heir to the Empire story from EU or from Legends now. Instead, I think they're going to redo it. I think that is what Dave Filoni is trying to line up for his movie and maybe a trilogy of movies, who knows. We've heard his film is reliant on the Mando movie coming up next year doing well, so if that doesn't do well, that may all fall apart. But I do think the hints are there in plain sight that he wants to do Heir to the Empire. We have Ahsoka literally calling Thrawn the heir to the Empire at one point in the Ahsoka series. I think that is currently the plan. Now, what exactly is that going to look like? Is it going to be a cheap knockoff of the Heir to the Empire that we know and love? Or is it going to try to be something that really tries to recapture that and maybe directs the franchise away from the sequels Filoni has said before that just because the sequels are there doesn't necessarily mean that whatever story we tell right now in the Mandoverse has to be a part of that necessarily. Now, that's not exactly how he worded it, but he basically said it's a big galaxy. Not every story has to be a direct continuation or a prequel to something else, that things can be independent because this is a massive galaxy and things can be happening in one place that don't necessarily impact elsewhere. So maybe he is going to try to give us an Heir to the Empire movie or trilogy that is very accurate to what the books were. I don't know if that's true or not. That's maybe just a hope of mine. But maybe that is the plan. And he has also said before that, canon doesn't necessarily have to be consistent. That it's even better when it isn't, he basically said at one point, which I kind of disagree with. But if it means getting Heir to the Empire in movie form, maybe I agree with it. Anyway, I do think we are going to see a version of Heir to the Empire. Now, how accurate is it going to be to the books is the question. I tend to think it's not going to be super accurate. It's going to be Heir to the Empire in name alone, and because you're using Thrawn, and maybe you bring in a Mara Jade and a Talon card or some of the other characters from the books. But one way or another, I would buckle up for an Heir to the Empire movie. Alright, well I think that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below and tell me what you think should be done with Luke Skywalker, or what shouldn't be done with him. Should he just be left alone at this point? But whatever the case may be, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.